Hey guys, this is Lloyd Danzig, founder and managing partner at Sharp Alpha Advisors, and I'm going one-on-one with ADC partners.
Hey, this is Dave Elmy of ADC Partners, and thanks for checking out this latest episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If it's your first time here, thanks for stopping by to listen. If you've been here before, please take a second to rate or review the show. It's always appreciated. Now, at one point in his career, Lloyd Danzig, the founder of Sharp Alpha Advisors, was pretty confident that there was money to be made in what he calls the competitive entertainment industry. The Supreme Court had just opened up sports betting for states to adopt. He had a solid investing background, had recently earned a degree in data science, and had always loved fantasy sports. So good to go, right? Well, not exactly. Turns out there was still one thing missing, and that was permission to fail. And now with investments in over 30 online gaming startups, Lloyd and Sharp Alpha are light years away from failure. In our conversation, though, Lloyd and I talk about the process of launching his venture capital firm and why having a mentor share that wisdom about failure was so integral to his future success. We also cover the growth of online gaming, the competitive entertainment market, and what he looks for when making investments. He also fills us in on what the unending torture of being a New York Jets fan is like, and it's awful. So thanks for stopping by for my conversation with Lloyd Danzig, the founder of Sharp Alpha Advisors. Hope you enjoy. Oh, and a special shout out to Brent von Forstmeyer and the University of San Francisco's sports management program for letting me use their downtown offices to make this recording with Lloyd. Go Dons, baby.
Lloyd, let's get some context on your history and your interest in sports and gaming, because they represent the focus for you in Sharp Alpha. So if you can, distill down your experiences with sports and gaming. You were the March Madness bracket creator, weren't you?
In short, yes. I was a particularly early adopter as a season-long fantasy baseball commissioner.
Okay, that was the start of it.
I turned my friends on and started a season-long fantasy baseball rotisserie league in 2001. I was 12 years old at the time.
12?
To be
You
12
were an
years
early
old,
bloomer.
To be 12 years old in 2001, there were no smartphones.
No.
Most people had one family computer with a dial-up modem with AOL.
The AOL software.
And there were still people in 2001, older than me, but who were doing fantasy baseball through the newspaper. Check the box scores each morning and manually tabulate it.
There are people right now who are just going, I don't even know half of
Right.
what he's talking about.
I mean, in 2001, just to give further example, on Yahoo, which was the only show in town at the time, there was no live data or live scoring unless you paid an extra $14.95 a month for a standalone app called Stat Tracker.
Wow.
So that when the baseball game started in the evening, if you wanted to see how the players were doing and how the standings were changing, you had to pay an extra $15 a month. Otherwise, literally, you would watch ESPN and you'd watch the ticker along the bottom, and you'd hope that your player was one of the two whose statistics, because it's usually a good thing. Sometimes it's bad. If Barry Bonds goes 0 for 5 in 2001, it'll show up on the ticker. But that was obviously, a million years ago in some respects technologically.
Really, no kidding.
And things in some respects have changed quite a bit to today. But the underlying thing that drew me to it then and draws me to it today is the same, which is the competition and camaraderie that competition breeds with your friends. You're playing against them, you're talking a little trash, you're reminiscing about the time you almost beat them, they almost beat you. You develop these inside jokes, this shared knowledge and history together. When I was 12 years old, there was no Uber either. So our dads had to drive us to the draft, and they sat with us and oversaw.
Did your dad lean over your shoulder and go, don't pick that guy?
Of course. And then when the kids would go away to, summer camp or whatever we would do during the summer, the dads would all run the fantasy teams for July and August.
That's kind of interesting, though, because it's not really even just a camaraderie with your friends. It's a real father-son kind of thing, too. So you really saw the connectivity of the whole
I grew up in the Bronx. My dad is from the Bronx. We grew up going to Yankees games together. Many, many of my greatest memories are all, and look, fortunately, I was a kid when the Yankees won 4 World Series in 5 years.
Let's not talk about that.
So I will say I grew up thinking this is just how sports fandom works. Your
Right.
team just wins the championship, and there's a parade every year. This is great.
This is the best.
Didn't turn out so much that way. Yankees are hot this year, but was sad to see the Knicks exit the playoffs early. But anyway, that same competition, camaraderie, friendship, social connection, that's what hooked me back then, made me want to be entrepreneurial enough to take the motivation and all the organizational headaches that come from being the organizer.
And did you always have a facility with the numbers part of the piece? Like that kind of piece always
So,
came easy to you?
There are
or was it-
two answers to that question which are related.
All
Yes, math was always my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember I had an SAT tutor come over, an SAT math tutor, and halfway through the session he went to my mom and said, "Look, this is a waste of time. I'm never coming back, but can I stay and ask Lloyd for 30 minutes how he would do these questions so I could tell, my other
This was not a
students?"
conversation that happened in the Almy household.
Right. So math, more so like reading, history, art, terrible. I'm the least artistic, person you'll ever find. Can't draw a circle for the life of me.
I understand.
Math, numbers, definitely those are my thing. But on top of that, or relatedly, I have been fascinated. I truly fascinated from a young age in the business model of a sports book or casino. Because every other type of business on earth, you make pizza, you know how much the ingredients cost, you know how much your employees and rent cost, you know how much you're charging, and at any given time you go into any pizza shop and you say you're selling those slices for $3, how much are you making on those slices? And the answer is known. Every business, every widget maker, every service industry on earth. But you go to a casino and say, how much is the casino going to make on this one roulette spin, or this one blackjack hand, or this one sports bet? And they don't know because the answer is not known. All they know and rely on is the law of large numbers and statistics, that over time, enough people playing. And to me, the concept that there are these businesses that rely on math, on statistics, on the law of large numbers, like that's the coolest thing ever. And so that really endeared me to the space, and of course, just being a baseball data nerd and keeping track of all the statistics.
So you kind of married these two things: the love of the science, the love of the math, the love of the camaraderie associated with this. But then, how did the piece associated with casinos get on your radar? Was this something that you explored as a young person, saying, "I really want to try to get involved in this"? Interesting, or what was the exposure to sports?
I wish I could say it was like this deliberate path that I took. And in fact, I wish in retrospect I had been turned on to what I'm doing now earlier.
Yeah.
And I was in every position to do so. I went to UPenn undergrad in the business school at what I think was a golden era for sports education. Scott Rosner, who now runs Columbia's entire sports business program, taught business of sports. Andrew Brandt, who was VP of the Green Bay Packers and NFL Media Insider, he taught sports law.
Great insights.
And Ken Shropshire, who literally wrote the book on sports negotiations, taught negotiations. And I took all those classes, and they were my favorite classes, but I took them for fun.
Yeah.
I really, truly never thought it would. I think at the time, I thought the only job in sports was basically sports agent. I don't know if I even knew there were.
I can either play or I can represent.
Right,
the
or maybe
player.
I could be like a ticket salesperson,
Yeah.
and that's about it. I had a traditional kind of standard Wall Street finance career post college, and
Right, so you go to BlackRock.
right. So I went to undergraduate business school, went to BlackRock, great firm, cannot recommend it highly enough. Worked at a few others.
They're doing okay.
They're doing okay. Over 10 trillion in assets under management, largest asset manager in the world last time I checked. Moved to some smaller shops and was on some trading desks. I went back to school. I went to Columbia full-time graduate school to study computer science.
Okay, so you left the investment side of it, go right back and focus
I
on...
left it because what I noticed in, 2013, 2014-ish, is that this whole quantitative algorithmic finance thing was taking off. And it's not so novel
The rise
to say
of the
now.
quants.
10 years ago, even, it was somewhat novel. There wasn't a Michael Lewis book about high-frequency trading yet. There was no GameStop Reddit saga.
Yeah, there was no book, but you were beginning to see the context for which...
Totally. And at BlackRock even, I saw the quant team who had were on the same floor as us. Like, they were doubling in size, every month. And our team was staying the same size. And you could just tell.
Right.
All the smartest people I knew from Wharton and Columbia that wanted to make the most money possible, they were all doing the same thing, quantitative finance.
Okay.
So it makes you pique your interest when all the smartest people you know are suddenly working on something new. And I had a math background, or at least I had a proclivity for numbers. But I really, and it's on me, I did not take advantage as an undergraduate in the opportunity to get a good formal computer science background. The theory of computer science, the history of computers, the theory behind, why do you use different data structures to store different types of data in different ways, and then a, sort of coding 101 that you get as kind of like an undergraduate computer science degree. And while, you can use the internet for that, and certainly there's a lot of great resources, I really was interested in quantitative finance, went back to get a degree in computer science, data science to pair with financial services background, and took a job briefly at a really large advertising agency doing data science for Samsung. And the plan was to use that as a stepping stone. And in May of 2018, I was interviewing at Citadel, Bridgewater, AQR, the big quantitative finance companies. And my story was, hey, I worked on Wall Street. I didn't have a quant background. I went back to grad school. I've now spent a year doing data science for Samsung. And while that's not finance per se, you look at what I did before, you look at what I did now. Hey, Citadel, would you like me to come?
The story starts to clarify.
It starts to make a little more sense.
Yeah.
But totally serendipitously, May 14th, 2018 is when sports betting was legalized in the U.S. To be more specific, what happened is a 1992 court case that made sports betting illegal outside of Nevada was overturned and deemed unconstitutional. It was deemed a violation of the 10th Amendment, which says that in this particular case, sports betting, if not specifically enumerated as a federal right, should be a state's right. And each state should decide if, how, and when to operate sports betting within their borders.
And alarm bells go off in your head.
And I say, I know this customer base better than anyone in the world.
So it's fascinating to me, right? So this is like two rivers flowing down separate from one another, and all of a sudden there's this confluence where you have this fundamental understanding of, God, this is where the camaraderie is. This is really fascinating to me. You saw where the numbers go. And then this legalization happens, and so you find this opportunity to take a look at these two pretty monumental things in your life and say, here it is.
Absolutely. And the more specific insight that I had at the time was that if you, collective you, me specifically as a customer, like participating in sports betting and fantasy sports, not for the financial return, but for the social, emotional return, well, that can be a very lucrative business to be in. Because if you are in a business where your customers don't expect a financial return, you can have really nice juicy margins because you're delivering them something intangible in return.
Right.
And it turns out if you can do that well, everybody wins because the customers, they come away with more happiness per dollar than they could get elsewhere. And you come away with more dollars per unit of happiness than you could derive elsewhere. And it's a nice harmonious relationship. Obviously, there can be darker sides of gaming and gambling problems, but the role that gaming has played in my life is one that I thought with technological innovation it could play in others. And I started looking around at opportunities and ended up being part of a small group that helped launch a company in New York called Simple Bet that while it hasn't been finalized, there are now rumors that DraftKings is buying the remaining 85% of the company that they don't own for $170 million.
So was that informal, that look at Simple Bet, just to try to get your toe in the water?
I totally randomly was reached out to by a recruiter who said, I'm working with a sports betting startup that needs data scientists. Do you want to interview as a data scientist? And I took a call, which was originally going to be them giving me highly technical data science and machine learning related questions. And almost immediately, I went to, it was a one-bedroom apartment on West 31st Street in New York at the time. That was the company's headquarters. The CEO, who, by the way, is a Thiel fellow who got the Peter Thiel scholarship to drop out of Columbia to take money to start a company. He would sleep in the bedroom, and the few people that worked for the company worked in the living room. I mean, it really was as scrappy.
It was a startup.
And immediately on both sides, it was clear that there was an opportunity for me to do a lot more than data science there. So I ended up, I did pretty much all of the fundraising for the seed and Series A. I built the materials, I built the financial model.
So you deep into the pool. I mean, you were in.
I personally recruited employees number 10 through 60 there, who were all double PhDs and whatnot. But really, when I look back on it, I sat down with a couple of really amazing product-oriented people and the founder of this company in 2018, and we talked about how sports betting was growing. We all, the four of us, are people just like me who grew up as the March Madness bracket organizers.
This conversation is so hot, like there's fire departments going by right now.
Exactly right. They are coming to put out this fire. And we were talking about how much growth there was going to be in sports betting, We talked about how when we looked at other established sports betting markets, the products that existed were very unimpressive to us. They were not what we would want to use as lifelong gamers, gamblers, fantasy sports players. We thought about, okay, what products would we want to use? And then what infrastructure would have to exist to make those products come to fruition? And then we went to every big, DraftKings and FanDuel were not nearly as big at the time.
Right,
Our bigger European and Asian counterparts. We went to every company, and we got laughed out of the offices of every single one. Most of them wouldn't even take the call. And there were a parade of international industry experts who would say, I have been a part of the real money gaming industry for 30 years. You guys are just naive and don't realize that you think you're enthusiastic, but because you're new to the space.
Is that a hard thing? I mean, does doubt start to creep in? Did you have real belief in
Oh
what you
my
guys
God.
were doing?
I mean, I believed that there would be people who wanted the products that we had in mind, and I believed that there would need to be better infrastructure to cause those to exist. But those things can be true without it being an amazing multi-hundred-million-dollar business. There are lots of things that are cool or fun to work on or people get use out of, but that you can't build into a large venture scale business. And I remember thinking, all right, maybe this is a cool idea, but it's just a much smaller market than I had in mind.
Okay.
You know, when people
You thought maybe calibrate.
yeah, maybe I didn't calibrate right. Maybe it's actually, you know, their whole view was every time sports betting's legalized in any country, there's all these enthusiastic young people who think they're going to change the way sports betting has been done for hundreds of years, and they come out with all these ideas and none of them work, and I've seen this happen a million times, and so I'm not going to get excited about your project, and I'm not going to introduce you to this person, and we're not going to, you know, take a commercial agreement. And I mean, and this is such a theme for me, definitely, is recognizing in retrospect how I should have had more confidence in my instincts. And even when people twice my age and 1,000 times my net worth with certainty tell me something is wrong, you can't use someone else's map of the world to navigate your own.
Your own map.
They're giving you advice based on the few snippets of information you gave. You're, you know, in the trenches day to day. They don't have all that information. They're not seeing the world through
basing
your
a lot
eyes.
of their decision making on 30 years of history, not 30 years of future.
Sure. Now they're saying, look, I'm a pattern recognizer. I was here when the UK legalized sports betting and Australia, and those are both English-speaking, similarly cultured places as the US. You're not talking about, you know, Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, and we've seen this, you know, they're so confident every time, every real money gaming market it opens, people think they have ideas for new sports betting products. They don't realize that their enthusiasm is just naivete. Today, or tomorrow, or someday soon, hopefully, and again, not reporting on any, you know, non-public information, that the rumors are swirling and
You
have
got
been
to
reported.
break new information.
I mean, if I had some, I would, and I hope that this breaks and closes soon, but it looks like DraftKings will acquire Simplebet in a deal worth about $200 million, and perhaps more gratifyingly, every sports betting company on earth today is scrambling to offer the products that we came up with and were laughed out of the offices when pitching about 6 years ago.
That is a certain feet up on the desk moment.
Of course, and there's something nice about that, and more importantly, you know, in venture capital, you're looking for outlier outcomes. You're looking for extreme outcomes. And to do that, you generally have to pick ideas that don't sound so smart now, but only will sound good in retrospect. And if you take that kind of approach, many of them are going to end up being embarrassing, not so good ideas. And those are going to reveal themselves to be bad ideas way before the one good idea, you know, in retrospect, 10 years later, manifests itself as such.
Can you talk a little bit about, when we first talked, you used the phrase competitive entertainment.
Sure.
And that really struck home with me, particularly when you think about it in the context, like you just mentioned, you saw, you know, legalized betting in England, you saw legalized betting in Australia, and you had people who were established in those markets telling you, like, that's not going to work, don't do that, or whatever, going to laugh you out of the room. You talked about having a fundamental understanding of this particular market, the United States, and how people engaged with gaming and gambling products. Can you speak to that for a minute, the distance between those cultures and how this market is in that particular regard?
What you find is that knowledge has this fractal-like nature to it. When you're zoomed out, it seems very smooth around the edges. But as you zoom in on one of the edges of knowledge on a particular topic, you realize it's filled with all these gaps. And once you start to understand and explore those gaps, it starts to become so obvious to you how things will be in the future or why they are not that way. And if you're really lucky, you will find further fractal buds that you can keep exploring and getting deeper and deeper. And that, I think, certainly is something to some extent that happened here. Competitive entertainment is a phrase that I use and define as any form of entertainment where winning matters, where outcomes matter, where rooting for something is the primary source of enjoyment. And what I found, first in sports betting, but have now extrapolated out elsewhere, is that we just have, and I've thought a lot about why, I haven't quite landed on why, but we in the US have a different sociocultural orientation toward gambling, toward sports betting, toward risk-taking, toward competitive entertainment, than anywhere else in the world, I would say. You go to the nicest, most expensive, high-end sports book in the nicest neighborhood in London, and what you will find is something that is kind of like if you've been to an off-track horse betting parlor here in the US, or some people describe it either as sort of like a post office type location, or I heard one person describe it as the physical manifestation of a spreadsheet.
You make it sound so glamorous.
It's a transactional location.
Yeah.
They don't intend it to be glamorous. It is a place to get in, place your bet as efficiently as possible, and get out.
Yeah, the perfect word is transaction.
Transactional. That is what it is designed as. And that is the same in Australia and anywhere else in Europe and in any of these mature gaming markets.
Boy, that is not the way it is here.
In Las Vegas, at a sports book, the odds are one of the least important facets of the entire customer experience. I don't mean that they can take away the odds. I meant whether someone is favored by 5 points or 7 points or 9 points is irrelevant to the experience of almost every guest there. They are there to see and be seen. It's a social environment. It's a party. It's a cool place to watch a game, even if you're not betting. And I think that is a beautiful microcosm for how differently things like sports betting sit in our culture than others. I've thought a lot about why. I don't have a real thesis yet. I suspect it has to do with the risk-taking entrepreneurial nature of the U.S., where, depending on who you talk to, we idolize billionaires here. There's no amount of money you could make that would be too much, at least in some people's eyes, right? And so American dream, entrepreneurship, and perhaps that is some of the risk-on behavior that then becomes more socially appropriate, because it's very socially appropriate to be hustling, to be entrepreneurial, to be trying to make it big. I don't know yet. Don't quote me on that. I'm still thinking a lot about why this is the case.
I just recorded it. Of course I'm quoting you on this. Talk a little bit about how Sharp Alpha first started to come together in your mind. I mean, you have the experience with the first investment, trying to move that along. But did you always have an entrepreneurial streak? Was this something that was in you, or was it more just a oh, look what happened type of thing?
This is a great question. I don't know if I've really talked about this extensively anywhere. Always had an entrepreneurial streak, yes. As young as I can remember, family would come over to the house for holidays. I would go in the backyard. I'd pick up rocks. I'd organize them, and I'd have a rock sale. $1 rocks, $2 rocks. Buy two, get one free for the aunts and uncles and grandparents. And you name any age, I'll tell you some funny entrepreneurial thing I was doing. Most recently, prior to heading into this world, as a side hustle, when I was working, I forgot which job I was at the time, and this will show my age perhaps, I had a bachelor and bachelorette party planning business for celebrities and influencers. So I did a few NBA players' bachelor parties and some cool stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. That's a whole nother. We'll have to do volume 2.
Definitely.
On that one.
So did I have an entrepreneurial itch? Yes. Did I then recognize a big opportunity? Also, yes. And I went to 2 different mentors of mine. If I'm good at anything in the world, it is surrounding myself with good people and knowing how to learn from them. I'm not particularly smart. I just figure out good people and when to ask them for the right advice, and have been lucky to have some just amazing mentors. So I went to one particular mentor, a guy named Larry, who's a successful hedge fund manager. He has a very specialty niche strategy that he is the king of, and his focus on specialization is something that always resonated with me, and he's just a guy who is so accomplished that his belief in me was always a really important factor. Mm-hmm. And I went to him and said, look, I'm seeing this huge opportunity in the intersection of sports and gaming and entertainment and technology. But I remember saying, I want to just be like a connector. I want to get the right people in the room together, and if they end up doing a deal that's successful, I can get a piece of it. I feel like that's, what I'd be good at and how I could monetize this opportunity. And I guess that kind of is like being a banker or consultant, advisor, broker, depending on how you think about it. And Larry, to his credit, and again, it's from where he comes from, said to me, look, Lloyd, based on how I think of you and what I know your aspirations are, if you want to make a name for yourself, and you've never come to me before in 20 whatever years and said you had a lot of conviction on something, if this is that thing, you can't make a name for yourself by just playing a sort of picks and shovels role and matchmaking. You need to be willing to put your name down and say, I think this is the right bet to make. Because if you can do that and you can become a person who makes bets that work out as investments over time, that just unlocks a completely different career trajectory, lifestyle. It gets you in a different type of set of rooms, and it's just a totally different trajectory than, not to say I have plenty of friends who are very successful as bankers, brokers, consultants, and advisors. And that was a big conversation. And then I went to another mentor of mine, someone whose advice I always treasure so much. I won't say too much about him because he keeps a bit of a low profile. His name is John, but he is actually the protagonist of one of the best-selling business books of all time, written by an author who has written many business books that became blockbuster movies that I'm sure everyone listening to this has heard. I don't believe this particular book has become a movie yet. And his name is not John in the book. They change it to something, so people don't always realize it's him.
All right.
And he has a big-time role in, I'll just call it the emerging technology sphere today. And I went and had lunch with him at a diner in Midtown Manhattan, and I told him what Larry said, and I explained that I still was feeling just very hesitant about the amount of vulnerability and courage and confidence that it took to not only put your name on a company and launch it, but then to make investments, early stage investments, where you won't know if they're successful for many, many years. And there's a ton of hidden information, missing information. And I was concerned about how hard that must be to make a bet and have all your investors wanting to know how that bet is working out, but not being able to tell them, for a longer period of time. And I won't get into specifically, but that conversation I remember so distinctly. I really left feeling like he gave me permission, which is a weird word, but permission to fail.
Yeah.
Not to defraud people, not to be dishonest, but he really conveyed to me that if you believe in this and you do it with transparency and honesty and integrity, I can't guarantee you that every investment or any of the investments will work out, but I guarantee you that everyone will appreciate that you put your best foot forward and you'll live to fight another day, raise another fund, do something else.
And you had belief.
I did, but I didn't have, until that conversation, the permission or courage to fail, I would say. And so I'll have to make sure John in particular, hears us talking about this, because he gets so much credit for finding the right combination of words that made me leave that diner that morning saying, okay, you know what? I am going to do this because as long as I treat everyone well and I'm honest and transparent, it's okay if it doesn't work out as a screaming success.
You had permission to fail.
Absolutely. And that is the answer to how did this become not just, two rivers intersecting and an idea and conviction, but how did it go from that to what now looks like a very deliberate and established firm, but certainly was anything from it, 5 or 6 years ago.
Can you, for those people who may not be as familiar with finance and venture and the companies like Sharp Alpha, can you give a 30,000-foot view of the company, the focus of it, and what it is you're doing today?
Sure. So we do a few different things, but primarily our bread and butter as a venture capital firm is we write $1 to $2 million seed checks into early stage companies, usually software companies building in the sports, gaming, and entertainment industries.
Podcasts, anybody?
We generally do not do media companies. We do have one that is particularly successful, but all jokes aside, we really do software. Investing is our focus. We have capital reserved so that if the company is doing well, we then put actually a much larger check in later on. And, we usually take a very active role. Companies that benefit from introduction and access to the sports teams, leagues, and media companies and sports books, or domain expertise in building products, gamification, fan engagement, access to regulatory and legal expertise that is specific to the industry. All those kind of things those are the types of companies that we look for because we want to invest where we have an edge. There's lots of great places and ways to make money. I don't have an edge in most of those places right now. I have an edge in early stage seed Series A sports gaming and entertainment software companies. And so that's what
But
we
niche
look
is
for.
important, right?
Of course.
Yeah, particularly for companies like Sharp Alpha, which are carving out this particular place to become known in that industry, and one that has clearly established a ton of potential. I mean, you clearly understood earlier than most, so that's where the value came from it.
Definitely.
But that idea of niche is really important for that particular industry,
Huge.
building out that expertise.
I got that very much from Larry, the first mentor. And again, I don't want to give him too much publicity he might not want, but he has a very niche specialty hedge fund strategy. But he's the king of it. Anyone you ask about, oh, who's the best at trading these type of shares of these type of companies, they'll tell you this guy's name right away. And that, I think, really rubbed off. And it was critical because, look, we're sitting here right now. Andreessen Horowitz's office is down the road over there. Kleiner Perkins' office is down the road over there. Why would any investor, a limited partner is the name for an investor in a venture capital firm, why would any limited partner give me money to pursue the same strategy as Andreessen, who has perfected it in a generalist sense?
I think they got it nailed.
Right, they got it down. They wouldn't. They wouldn't. They would be smart to if I had a specific niche and a specific strategy where I can deploy an edge, and if they are bullish on that. It's hard for me to raise money from someone who thinks sports gaming and entertainment are going nowhere. I can't convince them of that if they don't think that it has a viable future.
But you got to be at the place where people who are thinking about that and recognize the opportunity as you did have a place to go.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things I have come to appreciate is just the importance of, and every B2B salesperson will know this, but others will not have think about it as much, the importance of qualifying your leads and just qualifying how you spend your time. You could spend all day, every day, toiling away and feeling like you're busy without actually making progress if you're not careful to think about the impact of the things that you're working on that day and how you're spending your time.
Can you talk a little bit, having now had some success, you've exploited the niche, you've started to invest in a bunch of companies that fit the sports and entertainment from the online gaming piece. How have you seen the companies coming to you focus their approaches to what they're asking from you or what they're pitching to you? Where are you starting to see new opportunities that appeal to you, or what are the ones that are feeling like this hits the strategy so well that your antenna starts to go up?
I could sit here as of the day of recording, and we can do this in a few minutes, and I can think about over the last 2 weeks, thematically, what was the common thread among the most interesting companies that I spoke to. But that might not be the same thing, by the time this is recorded and released and by 2 weeks from now. And so the most honest answer that I can give, which is an indirect answer to your question,
Caramel off the wall.
is that we are almost anti-buzzword. If you're trying to invest really early, by the time a buzzword exists, it might be too late. If you're Andreessen or Kleiner Perkins and you can write $100 million checks into late stage rounds, you can wait until a buzzword exists. But if you're trying to invest $1 to $2 million to own 10% of a company when it's really just a couple of guys and a pitch deck, it's a slightly different just dynamic.
So by the time artificial intelligence blockchain makes it to your desk, it's too late.
Potentially. I hate to make a hard sweeping comment like that because we look at all of that and, within the world of sports, for example, blockchain and AI, those are so broad, but let's say tokenized fantasy sports where you have an NFT that corresponds to a player and by owning that NFT, you can play that player that week and all the benefits of blockchain make sure that no one else has that player and there's a limited amount and there's provable fairness and things like that. Tokenized fantasy sports is something I would say got at some point to be a buzzword and was indicative that, all right, So Rare and Dapper Labs, they're already multi-billion-dollar companies. If I'm now seeing a 26th tokenized fantasy sports deal, that probably means it's too late and too saturated. I would be hesitant to, blockchain or AI in a sweeping way.
Those are Dave Almy non-technical buzzwords.
Sure,
that you're aware of.
fair, absolutely fair enough. So to finish indirectly answering your question, what I look for, I obviously, and I've explained some here and can get into more. I and we have a firm have a way of viewing the world. We have trends that we look at. We think sports viewership will be different in 5 years compared to now in certain ways. And those are not bullish or bearish statements. They're just the way we view the world. There's ways of entrepreneurs working with investors that we think are right. They're not necessarily right for everyone, but they're right for us. So we're always screening for people who view the world the same way, who are building into the tailwinds that we believe in. But what I really want is an entrepreneur who tells me what the buzzword is going to be and why it exists and why everyone is so stupid for not realizing it and why they are uniquely positioned to know that this thing is going to become a buzzword. That's what we look for more than any specific theme or category I could ever tell you.
And this is something you brought up previously too, is the idea of great idea versus great people, right? Because you can look at the market and you can think of where it's going to be headed, and you can have people come to you with an idea that you think is going to exploit that. But so much also relies on the people who are going to be realizing that vision or realizing that concept or idea. Can you speak to that balance between great idea, great people, and where you fall on the side of the fulcrum for that?
Sure. I don't think there's anyone on earth who wouldn't agree in principle to the statement that, you should invest in amazing founders, and at the early stage you need to back the right people. I don't think there's anyone, including myself 5 years ago, who would disagree with or dispute that at all. But I do think that people who haven't spent a lot of time making bets on early ideas, whether that's in venture capital or if you're at a large organization and you're the one signing off on budget, there's many ways outside of venture capital that you could be in such a position. I very much underestimated and failed to initially internalize really how important it was and what it meant. And you might, or your listeners might have heard people say things like an A-plus founder can outweigh a B-plus idea, product, TAM, opportunity, timing, but not the other way around. A B-plus founder will never bring an A-plus idea, product, opportunity to a venture scale return. Again, something that intellectually I would have agreed with. I would have marked true on a true or false quiz too.
But then the practice of it.
But the practice of it. And the reasons I would give for you now as to why I am so much more founder focused are not even different from the reasons I would have given you 5 years ago. So they're the obvious things, I think. No tech company has the same product on their IPO day as in their initial pitch deck. Netflix used to deliver DVDs in the mail, if people listening even know what DVDs or mail are. Facebook never had ads. That was not the point. And so you know that the market is going to pull some sort of product out of the business, and you need to bet on the people who will navigate. I think I probably just didn't realize truly how hard it is to take an idea from your mind, build it in real life, and then get people to buy into that and do all the crazy things you need to do to survive 10 years later to have a successful outcome. And so to summarize all of this, we now, at the end of our diligence process, we do all our financial modeling and our underwriting and our due diligence, and we bring in lawyers and experts and everything you might imagine. And then we say to ourselves, is this a founder or a management team, if it's co-founders, whose future earnings we want to own a stake in, regardless of what they're pitching us today? And if the answer is no, the deal does not get done. It does not matter how good all of that other work was and how many people are saying yes. That is the test, and I have only every day grown more and more ardent about following that type of mentality. So we'll check back in 5 years if I have reverted to the mean at all, but I do not expect that to be the case.
Writing that in my calendar right
Please
now.
do.
5-year check-in. I mean, there has to be a couple people out there who are listening to this conversation who are thinking, oh, geez, I love sports, and I got what I think is a great idea. I'd love a chance to get in front of Lloyd to pitch something, and I'm not going to give you his number right now, so don't think that's going to happen. But as we were talking previously, sports can be that real double-edged sword. It's great because it motivates you, and you're excited about it, and it's fun to be around, but sometimes that passion can blind people a little bit. So I'm wondering if you have advice for people who are thinking about not even just online gaming and those kinds of things, but the broader idea of being a founder, of being an entrepreneur, and taking a product, a technology product in particular, to get investment backing. Like, what advice do you have for those people out there who are listening to this?
Before I answer, I just want to comment on part of your question. I think it's a really interesting point that some people don't quite appreciate. If you're the NBA or the NFL head office, for example, that people will take a pay cut to work for you so that their email address is at NFL.com and they get the perks of getting free tickets and saying they work for the NFL. And
Because you turned down the NBA job to be in data science, didn't you?
Yeah, good memory. Did we talk? I don't even remember talking about that with you. Yes.
I know everything, Lloyd.
I was, just for the interest of listeners, I was very heavily and briefly considering a machine learning data science role in-house at the NBA, and they certainly have a team now that does this, that is monitoring all the data related to betting. Where are the referees? What are the referees tweeting? Who's complaining and who might be, I don't know, fixing games,
Who's missing
challenging
free
the integrity?
throws?
So
Yeah.
it's a really cool, algorithmic data science group at the NBA designed to protect the integrity of the sport. So if you're the NBA, you know that people will take pay cuts. The NBA's business cards are so cool. They're skinny. They're like the actual NBA logo, but in a business card form. And people love that. Because of that, they pay lower guaranteed salaries than someone of equal experience would get at an investment bank or consulting firm, but they also probably get 10 times the number of applications. And it's the same thing with startups. There's a huge benefit that people will take as payment the enjoyment they get from working something they're passionate about, but it also means there's a lot more noise that you have to separate out the signal from. I think my answer on this question is, they're related, is I've used this phrasing a lot. Be the type of founder that someone wants to own a future stake in, regardless of what you are building. That is a great idea. Now, how do you do that? That's complicated. I did hear Warren Buffett apparently used to give this great advice when he'd talk at schools, and he would say, think of your 5 friends who you would most want to own a future stake in their earnings. What are their common traits, and how can you be most like those 5 people? I thought that's a good Warren Buffett exercise. And then secondly, and this will pull from Mark Andreessen quoting comedian Steve Martin, meaning in very different ways the same thing, which is be so good they can't ignore you. People get so tripped up on, like, how can I network my way to the right person to convince them that there's urgency, that they need to put money into my deal now, and then use that money to propel myself in the media and hire the right people and get to the next level of success. And there are a few people out there, very few, but there are a few people out there who are just these amazing choreographers that just bend the world to their will, and even without traction in a product, like, they get everyone to buy in, and then the buy-in is what produces the success. But that is, when I say that it's the exception, not the rule, I mean, that's the understatement of the century. For the overwhelming majority of entrepreneurs, if you just built a good product or a good business and it's making money and people are downloading it and there's positive app store reviews and people are requesting new features, and if you're a B2B company, enterprise clients are coming to you to upsize their contracts, everything else will take care of itself. The fundraising will take care of itself. Hiring will take care of itself. And so I love the be so good they can't ignore you. Whether you're a stand-up comedian, an entrepreneur or otherwise, it's not a trick, but it really is the only shortcut, if you would call it a shortcut, is just build a great company that people want to use, that people want to pay for, and everything else will take care of itself. The best way to raise venture capital is to not need it in the first place, frankly.
So as we begin to wrap up here, I know you have, 30 close investments into 30 companies?
Yes,
right
correct.
around there right now, and I know you love them all equally. But I'm wondering if there's a couple of standouts or ones that you're particularly excited about that you feel like are going to be what people are talking about in the coming months or years.
I'll probably just start by naming the most recent deal that we've announced, because it also happens to be one that I am most excited about, and it's a great time to be doing deals, and the trajectory this company took has been incredible. We are investors in a company that only recently came out of stealth mode called C15 Studio. C15 Studio is a sports-focused, sports-specialized platform that provides the best sports leagues in the world with the turnkey ability to launch a specific type of streaming channel called a FAST channel. FAST stands for Free Ad-Supported Streaming Television, and it is different from Netflix, for example, where you pay a subscription, or Hulu, where you pay a subscription or maybe you watch some ads. Those are subscription video on demand and advertising video on demand, as it suggests. Fast channels are good old-fashioned linear television from the old days.
What's old is new again.
But on streaming.
Yeah.
So you go to your Roku, you have a bunch of channels, there's no on-demand, there's commercials, you scroll through the channels, you see what's on channel A, maybe you change to channel B, you can see a TV guide at the end of 30 minutes, you see the next, again, good old-fashioned linear television, but on streaming. And tangentially, one of the benefits from a business perspective to fast versus good old-fashioned cable is that cable TV, everyone sees the same ad all the time. When you're delivering that same content, but digitally, everyone can get different ads, and so advertisers are willing to pay more because you can target ads in a way that you can't on TV. So given that a lot of the RSNs are failing or upside down or who knows what their future is, given that there are just all these huge secular shifts toward streaming, watching on mobile, watching on OTT, and that now all the teams and leagues really want to have a direct-to-consumer relationship. They want to own it directly. Many, if not all, of the top sports properties in the world are racing to launch fast channels that you can watch without a credit card, without an email, anywhere in the world. And NBA, NFL, MLB,
Yeah, I think the
PGA
Suns were one of the
Tour.
first teams to do it.
There's
right?
every major sports organization. I think there were maybe 40 sports fast channels 5 years ago, and I think there's 1,943 today.
Somewhere thereabouts.
So C15 Studio, they came out of stealth mode and announced that they are the official operator and distributor of the Formula One streaming channel, the One Championship, which is one of the largest combat sports leagues in the world, based in Singapore. And they haven't announced some of the other Tier 1 channels, but you will soon. And you can go on Pluto TV, Samsung TV Plus, Amazon Freevee, and soon to be others, and you can watch Formula One's streaming channel for free, without a credit card, without subscribing. And I don't want to say it's all thanks to C15 Studio, because if Formula One didn't have the sport and the content in the first place, there'd be nothing to do or watch. But it's C15 Studio that takes all the content, all the video footage, puts it into a 24-hour channel, programmatically sells all of the different ad spots, makes sure that there are things on 24 hours a day, distributes it to Pluto TV and all of that. If you're Liberty Media or Formula One, all you do is export some video files, once a week or once a day or once a month, and everything else gets taken care of. So I think you'll see a lot more fast channels. You'll see every sports team and league want to have their own Roku app or their own mobile app, whatever it is. And you'll see many of them select C15 Studio as the leading sort of turnkey provider that just takes care of everything. And so it's always fun when I can turn on a TV or a computer and turn on this channel. One of the reasons I'm so excited is that one of the hardest things about doing a deal with, let's say, a Formula One, it has nothing to do with technology. It has to do with just commercial savviness and business development prowess and patience and the ability to navigate a massive, potentially bureaucratic organization. And the founders that we bet on here, this was really a bet on them more than anything else. We were so impressed by how they handled the early Formula One and Pluto TV and Amazon negotiations. We felt they punched way above their weight. If you're a pre-launch stealth mode startup and you can get Liberty Media or Formula One to take you seriously and
pick up the phone,
right? To pick up the phone, let alone to then get a term sheet and turn that to a long-form contract and everything involved with that, it gave us the confidence to make a bet, and we did it alongside some other great sports tech, sports media investors that bring complementary value adds to the table. And that's one of the things we really like to do, is be around the table with other great investors where when we all combine forces, really de-risk the investment that we're making and use the cap table not as a point of differentiation, because the differentiation has to come for the company, but just as a little bit of a leg up, a little bit of a boost, a little bit of a shortcut to get the right people in the right rooms at the right time.
Lloyd Danzig, he is the founder of Sharp Alpha. I would say, man, this has been a great conversation. It's been a lot of fun, but now I got to do something that you're not ready for. Which is the lightning round.
Oh boy, prepared.
This is a series of questions. I have not revealed them to you.
No.
They are going to come out of your blind side, so I just hope you're ready for these. Shall we get to it?
Let's do it.
All right. You're also part of a nonprofit that's focused on the ethical development of artificial intelligence. My question is, how terrified of AI should I be?
Your fear should be directly proportional to your optimism.
That is a complex answer for the lightning round, Lloyd.
The only reason that AI is worth fearing is because it is so capable and so compelling to use for so many good things. If it was not, it would be easy to outlaw and throw in the trash. And so I think you should have a view on the power AI will have, and that power can, both be a positive or negative.
All right. What's the best sports bet you've ever played?
I will say on the notion, this is a recency bias, but during the NCAA tournament, a couple of the group of same friends that I've been doing fantasy baseball with since I was 12 years old, we were watching March Madness, and we did a parlay of all the underdogs that night to be the first teams to score 10 points. And so the last game of the night was the Grand Canyon University Antelopes, 12 versus 5 seed. I didn't even know there was a Grand Canyon University. I didn't know there were.
You didn't know they were the Antelopes.
Yeah. Go Lopes, baby. And we hit that bet, and we were all like, just jumping and rooting for it and hugging each other. And
where else can you get that excited about
that,
10 points scored by the
right?
Lopes?
And that rooting for that first to 10, the Grand Canyon University Antelopes, I got more happiness per dollar risked than anything else I've spent money on recently.
Okay, as established, you're a big New York sports fan.
Oh yeah.
All right. Which team would you wish a championship on first? Knicks? I know it's not going to be the Mets. The Jets or the Rangers?
Oh my God. The Jets are. I mean, look, the Yankees have won 27 World Series, and I mentioned 4 in 5 years when I was a kid. So they're hot. Judge is looking great. It's going to be a good year for the Yankees. Being a Jets fan has been one of the most painful and traumatic experiences of my entire life.
I'm sorry that people can't see this on video because a pallor just hit Lloyd
and so they deserve it. I deserve it. We deserve it. I want to go tailgate for the Super Bowl. I want to be there. I don't have much hope. We didn't get past the 3rd or 4th snap last year before Rodgers went down. So, perpetually pessimistic. But man, that's the easy answer.
All right, Jeff. If I told you the only time I won my March Madness bracket was when I selected which mascot would defeat the other one in battle, what would your response be?
I would say that makes perfect sense. The odds of getting a perfect bracket or getting the best bracket in a large group are so low that above a certain size of other bracket participants, your only hope is to have an outlier bracket that no one else is likely to have.
Because what happens? Nothing beats a Blue Devil back in those days. I mean, Blue Devil's going to beat everything. You can't, it's a magical creature.
I will look, there also is a bit of it's not a perfect correlation, but I went to UPenn. The Quakers, pacifist, Puritan type, that is like the least intimidating, mascot that exists. And I think you should bet against the Quakers every time. You'd be probably smart to not put UPenn in your March Madness bracket.
Lloyd, Danzig, thanks for the time, man.
Dave, this was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed it, we always appreciate a subscribe, share, comment, or like. And don't forget, you can always find past episodes at abcpartners.com/podcast. This podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Dave Almy. And theme music was composed by Scott Holmes.